Hello friends, welcome back to the channel for part 2 of my interview with Kathy McDaniel. I will have part 1 linked in the description where Kathy shares her distressing near-death experience and the insights that she brought back from that. Today will be the Q&A, and I am so excited for this part of our interview because I asked Kathy all of our toughest questions, all the stuff that you guys are constantly asking me in the comments. So I asked Kathy more about hell. I asked her, does she think it is a real place that she was in, or was it a creation of her mind? I asked her, how can somebody get out of hell if they find themselves in a hellish experience? I asked her thoughts on religion. She was very religious before her experience, and so I asked her, well, what are your beliefs now? And I also asked her thoughts on Jesus. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please enjoy. Here's Kathy. I was going to ask you what you think causes the hellish experiences, and then you mentioned that you chose it. Do you think that that is a real place you were in and those people that you saw there were real, or do you think that it's something that's created out of our minds?
I'm going to stick with it's something we've created. I saw 2 people there that were alive. And that was kind of confusing to me, but it made sense because I thought I was alive too. What happened is I needed to give those 2 people messages that they were going down the wrong road. And when I came back, it was interesting because they were both family members. And how do you bring it up? Say, I was in hell and I saw you there, and you've got something, and they kind of go, huh? So I had to be very careful about how I couched that, and neither one of them took it well. Let's just put it that way. One person, our relationship really deteriorated, and she hasn't spoken to me in probably 15 years. The other person came to me probably about 10 years later. And she'd just gotten divorced. She'd been in a terrible marriage. He had been treating her like a servant, using her for his own moving up the ladder, and she was miserable. So she came to me, she'd gotten the divorce, she was feeling guilty about it. And she says, would you mind telling me that thing again when you were in hell? And I did. She says, I was in hell. I was. And you're right. And what you said kind of gave me courage to break that off. But now hearing it again, now I feel vindicated. I feel like I don't need to feel guilty. And thanks. So that was interesting to me. Yeah. But, there's been a lot of studies done by the IONS people that just because you're a good person doesn't mean you're going to have a good NDE. Just because you're an evil person, you've killed yourself or something, you're going to have a terrible NDE. It just doesn't play out that way. A lot of times people who need to feel heaven, to be reminded of who they really are, who their spirit really is, it's just kind of a wake-up call, a gentle wake-up call that things need to change. For me, I'm no saint. I've been divorced 3 times. But that's when you get to heaven, they say, well, that was cool. It's what you decided to do. That's how you learned this, and that's how you learned that, and that's how your children learn this. And they, don't apologize. You can't do anything to get God upset with you. So back to, I'm pretty sure that there is evil out there. There are people I've heard that they feel more comfortable, their souls feel more comfortable in the dark, and that sometimes they, I don't know, I heard somebody at the conference the other day say they almost get a timeout, all right, you go over here, and kind of sit in the dark for a while and see if that's really something you want to continue. And I'm told a couple people have seen like a really dark place where people just are like gray shadows that walk around, and they don't know each other is there. They're just kind of, and they get a chance because there's free will. you can choose not to be with God. I mean, otherwise, what good is free will for? It's interesting.
Mhm.
I mean, for all the thousands of people that have gone to the afterlife, to heaven, they all come back with different pieces of it.
Right.
There's no way we can learn all the nuts and bolts of this thing unless we go and stay.
Mm. Yeah, that's a very good point. Now, this is a really difficult question. I've been asking everybody this recently. If you're uncomfortable with it, I can edit it out. Not a big deal.
How much do I weigh?
Do you think there's any situation like with somebody who's done horrible atrocities on earth, murdering people or, taking advantage of people? Do you think there's any type of punishment for those people?
From what I've learned, I think that if Hitler had a life review and got to feel the pain of not only what he did to those actual people, but to their families and how that's rippled, I think that would be a lot of punishment.
What advice would you have for people if they do find themselves in a hellish near-death experience to get out of a place like that?
Well, what I suggest in my book is to sing a Christmas carol. But, you don't know. I guess don't go there.
Mhm.
If you can take care of that now by rethinking what society, your religion, and your family has taught you for your whole life, if you can really take some time and look into some of this iron stuff and listen to some of the people that have come back and consider that maybe everything you've been taught is not true. It wasn't taught to you as a negative thing, but religion over the thousands of years has developed a lot of man-made rules and regulations to keep people in the religions. So one has to almost become spiritual, maybe in addition to religious, or as most of us that come back, we drop our religions because they don't make sense anymore. I had a heck of a time. I was hounding the priest. Don't tell kids they'll make God cry if they hit their sister. I says, do you know what you're doing to warp those kids' sense of thinking they can make God cry? Number one, gives them a lot of power, but stop it. You as adults, we need to look at that very closely and consider that maybe they're not going to go to hell because God will not judge them. There is no vengeful, hateful, unmerciful God. It doesn't exist. The only one that exists is full of love and will forgive you anything.
I'd love to hear more about your journey. You grew up as a Catholic, you said, and I'd love to hear about your journey since your experience and what you believe now.
It was hard. It was very difficult. I felt a lot of guilt. I tried to go back to church. I tried to go back to mass, and I would say the prayers. I believe in God, the Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth, and blah, blah, blah. And he sits at the right hand of the Father, and there's angels and I thought, no, there isn't. There's no thrones. There isn't. No, that's not what happens. So I thought, well, I'll just pick out words. And I literally did. I would say the prayers and I would say that sentence, but I wouldn't say those two sentences. And the thing that really, really got me was how everybody wants to get their body back at the last day. We're going to rise up all these moldy bodies and jump back in them and be so happy. I don't want my body back. Not when you've been in heaven and this free spirit to get crammed back in this body that coughs and, no. So there, I thought all the reasons that I was a Catholic are falling away. I don't want those things. I don't have to work at them. I just have to be loving and kind and merciful, forgiving. Those are those whole things. I don't have to worry about, in the old days, you couldn't eat meat on Friday, or you forgot to go to it was a holy day of obligation. And no, That's not how God works at all. So I promised. And, COVID was really good for me because what had happened just at the end there is I was only going on Saturday night. Well, it was one like Tuesdays or something. And the only people that showed up were like 12 of us, and we were all afraid of getting flu. So it was all 12 old peoples shotgunned all over the church. Would come time for the kiss of peace where you shake hands and we all wave at each other. And, it was great. And it wasn't the priest, it was the deacon. And he was married and had 5 kids, so he gave a sermon that was 5 minutes long and had humor in it. I could do that. I was doing that. I was okay with that. I could still go to communion. But then COVID came and we couldn't go to church. It's been 2 years. Now, when I go back and be with my family in California, I go to church because they still have such problems believing me. Even they don't want to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's threatening to them and their way. And my mom's 94. She's not going to give it up now. My sister was a reborn Christian. She's an altar girl and that whole bit. It's not up to me to throw a bomb in their beliefs. They're happy there.
Right.
They're happy there. But when I go, I just don't say the prayers. And I mutter, and my mom can't hear anyway. So she doesn't know, she sees my lips moving, but I'll go because it upsets them if I don't. And I always like being, I believe God's there, and I love going to communion. I still think that reminds me how God is in me and I'm in him. And, it's, but now I'm okay with it. I'm okay with it. I just have to be careful.
I love what you said, and I am right there with you. Actually, I stopped attending because of the COVID shutdown also, and it was sort of like my excuse to finally let go and have a reason why.
Yeah, permission. Mm-hmm.
But I also love what you said about being understanding of other people having their beliefs. There's nothing wrong with that, and it brings them comfort, and God is in that. So thank you for sharing all of that. One more question, and then we'll talk about your book. So, and I want to preface this by saying that there's no right answer. There's no answer that I'm digging for here. I'm just like you. I was raised Christian and I've deconstructed, and I'm just curious what your beliefs are on Jesus as being raised a Catholic, and then how you sang away in the manger and then were rescued from hell.
I was a fan of Jesus when I was little. I mean, he was my buddy. My family moved around a lot. I was always the new kid. So he was always with me. He was little. And if I was 7, he was 7, it was that kind of thing. I even, one time I was so alone as a new child, and I was playing tag on the outside for recess with Jesus. And I'd run and I'd catch him and I'd say, "You're it." And then I'd run the other way. And of course I got a reputation for being the weird kid, not only the new kid. I didn't care. But so Jesus and I have always been close. And I have always loved the parable about the prodigal son. And that's what was the biggest stepping stone for me coming back, about that, the prodigal kid, me, whoever it was, comes back and God throws his arms around and, and the other kids are going, "Hey, wait a minute, hey." But that to me seemed right. When we get around to Good Friday, I have a problem. I'm going to get in trouble for this. I have a problem with a God who is all loving and all forgiving, sending his, quote, only son down to be butchered and mutilated and destroyed so that God will forgive us. That makes no sense whatsoever. Any way you slice it. Now, Jesus was here, and this is my interpretation. I see myself as a little piece of God, and all us other billions of people, little pieces of God, and all the people on different planets and on different universes. And I see Jesus as a big piece. He was a big piece of God, and he said, we're all brothers and sisters. We're all children of God. We are. And so I see him as like the bravest soul that came down to try and teach love and forgiveness and love your neighbor as yourself. There's only one rule: love God, love your neighbor. It was all simple. Politics got involved, cultures got involved, and it got distorted. So I still think Jesus is great. And as far as Savior, that doesn't apply into anything I can reason with. The thing I see is he taught me how to live. He came down and he said, this is how you do it. And he's still my best friend.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. So please tell us about your book. You've written a book about your experience and where people can read it and what they can expect.
I was told over and over and over, I have to write a book by the voice, in my head, and then people and ions, and you've got to write a book. So at the last conference, I ran into this lady with her little cardboard table, and she was starting her own little publishing company. And she was also a medium. I didn't know what that meant at the time, and she didn't tell me till later. But when we were closing everything up, she's putting things in boxes. I walked by her table, and again, I was doing one of these things. And she says, hey, you need to write a book. And I said, oh, and she says, I'm just the gal to do it. She holds up her card and says, now call me. And I thought, that's really direct. I mean, so I went home. I thought about it. I gave her a call. I said, what's that involve? Well, you sit down, you write out your story, you write it, it is a book, and she gave me some people to talk with and all that. So I wrote out my story in my book and I sent it to her. And she says, well, that's only 10,000 words. And I said, yeah. And she says, well, you need at least 60,000. 60,000. I says, I just wrote everything I know. What am I going to do? She says, sit down and write. And I says, no, that's not helpful. She says, no, it'll come. It'll come. I thought, yeah, right. So I thought about it and I thought, well, I guess I could write about my life, and that would segue into why this happened to me. And then I thought, well, you wouldn't really understand that very well unless you knew my parents, and how I was raised. And then, well, then that doesn't make sense unless I have my grandparents, because my parents were raised by alcoholics, and there was all this that went on. So I thought, wow, there's a lot of material there, but I don't know where to start. So I just sat down, and she was right. It was like this, people say the download happens. Mm-hmm. And I just started writing, and I was laughing, and I was hearing these stories. I was like you would be telling me your story and I'm writing it down, and things like I'd get up in the middle of the night and I would hear like my grandmother say, now don't forget the time that, this and this and this, and I have to get up and make notes or she wouldn't be quiet. And I had a lot of help. And I kept going, and this went on and on and on. And she said, you need more. So I got to like 60,152 words. And I said, I'm done. I can't come up with any more. She says, that's fine. It'll give us room to edit. And the editor went through it. She says, well, this chapter needs to be up here, and this will make more sense if you put this there. And you spelled that wrong, and you need an apostrophe. And I had a book. So it just kind of made itself with a lot of inspiration and help from my relatives. And there's a lot of humor in it because my family is known to be quite humorous and a little on the nutty side. So there's a lot of humor with a tragedy. That's how my family survives. That's our MO. If we can find a little humor in something, we can survive it. And boy, hell, nobody has a sense of humor. That was the worst thing about hell. Worst thing.
Where can people get a copy of your book?
Well, it's on Amazon and Barnes and Noble, and let's see, my website, but it's cheaper on Amazon. And I've got the book and the Kindle, and the Audible is coming shortly. We had a little snafu with the Audible, so we had to take it off the market, and it's coming back on. It seems that sometimes this is pretty typical.
Mm-hmm.
who have been on the other side have problems with electricity when they
Mm-hmm.
get back.
Yep, I have that. I have a big problem with electronics.
I bet you do on your podcast. I had one podcast, it was Kirsty Salisbury over in Australia, and we had it all ready to go. And all of a sudden it was dark. And she's, oh my God, the entire block just went down. Because she'd had an experience, I had an experience. And she says, we'll have to do this another time. She said, I've lived here 10 years. It's never happened. And we just both laughed. I thought, well, that's pretty typical.
Yeah, the only reason I can do this, and I think we definitely planned this ahead. I'm married to a network engineer, and I go through computers, like 3 or 4 computers a year because they die on me, and he just keeps supplying more.
You're cheating.
Yeah.
Oh, shoot, that's great.
But anyway, I will have all of Kathy's links, her website, her social media, her book, everything will be in my description. So please check it out. Kathy, thank you so much. This has been one of the best conversations I've ever had. You are so inspiring. I love your energy and your passion. And thank you so much for spending this time with us.
Well, thank you. This has really been fun. I really enjoyed it. I love your show. I'm going to keep watching it.
Thank you.
You take care.
All right. You have a wonderful rest of your day. God bless.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.